Three, two, one. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. The semester is nearly over, actually. And so here we are. This week, we're going to take a look at some different accents of English, some different ways of pronouncing things. I'm fascinated by accents personally, and there are thousands upon thousands of different accents of English. And there are, when we say accent, it's a way of talking, and usually it's a group way of talking, whether it be regional, or locality, or ethnic, or age as well. Education also plays a role. There are also dialect, and a dialect and accent are similar, related, but they are different. So a dialect of English can have a different, much more different vocabulary and grammar, especially grammatical rules, than an accent. An accent follows most all of the same rules of the larger language, but a dialect can have different grammatical rules than the mother language, the larger language, we can say. So it is interesting to see what metaphors you like and dislike in discussion. So I am glad I asked that question, and just whether it be some things you don't like, whether because they're difficult to understand, or that they seem nonsensical, or that you just find them disgusting in their own way, or you just think they're overplayed. One example that is almost all of them, the phrase "it's raining cats and dogs." I don't like that phrase either. One, imagine if it was raining cats and dogs. That'd be really bad. I like animals. I don't want to see them fall down and hit the ground. That's bad. Also, it is nonsensical. It's because the phrase means it's raining heavily, but we don't know the pace of, we don't measure water in using animals. We don't say, oh well, I drank 2.5 cats of water today. No, we don't say that. So there are other ways of saying it's raining heavily. It's raining buckets outside. Buckets is a conveyance of water. It's sensical to me. So it is interesting to see. Today we're going to look at some accents. I try to find some examples, some real examples. And I'm going to have a small assignment for you. At the beginning of the semester, we had our setting goals, and now we're at the end of the semester. So we're going to go back and see how we did. Did we do well? Did we achieve our goals? Or did we overachieve our goals? Or did we not quite? Do we need to make adjustments? So we'll talk about that more later. With that, let's talk about accents. Everyone who is alive has an accent. Everyone. It's a way of talking, how we talk. A lot of times people assume that their accent is the normal way, and that only outsiders, foreigners, or people from outside the area have accents. It's a way of identifying someone who doesn't belong. That's not true, but everyone has an accent. But it is something how people think. If people speak differently than you, then they're the outsider. They don't belong to the area. And in fact, it's one of the easiest way of identifying people is how they talk. So even the phrase unaccented English implies that there is a non-accented way of talking. So today we're going to walk through some regional accents mostly, and try to find authentic examples, not actors, not drama. There is one from a film, but it's an okay example. But ways of people who actually talk that way. Because all too often TV shows or movies, they exaggerate the accent and the mannerisms. So I wanted to find real ways of talking. And so, one of the ways that we identify accents is through the sounds and how we pronounce certain words or phonemes. Another is vocabulary differences. So here, all of these cans of carbonated soft drink, what do you call this? Depending on what you call this is dependent in America on where you're from. So growing up, oh lordy, where'd my, oh lordy, where'd it go? There it is. Depending on where you grew up, you use different words. Now, I was born in Florida, but shortly after I was born, my family moved to California. So I called things like Pepsi and Coca-Cola, I called them soda. But then we moved up to the Seattle area, and people called them pop. And I got made fun of for calling it soda. It's just a silly thing to get made fun of for, but children will be children. But down in the American South, the Southeast, culturally the South, they call it Coke. As in, there's Coca-Cola, which was made in Atlanta, Georgia, but everything gets called a Coke. Mountain Dew is Coke. Everything is Coke. So if someone says, hey, do you want a Coke? And you're like, yeah, sure. And they'll, well, what would you like? We have Mountain Dew and Pepsi and Sprite. So depending on where you're from, we have different vocabulary. And you can see here in Florida, a lot of people from here moved south to Florida. And so the culture of southern Florida is much closer to the northeast of the country than it is to the south. All right, let's bring that back. Oh, shoot, patootie. All right. All right, so this is our first example. This is the Boston accent. And this is a city council member. He is a Bostonite.
Camuso.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly agree with both of my colleagues. And it's not just Cummings Park, it's Carr Park, it's Plaisted Park, it's throughout the community. I think at this point, too, I'd like to send an official resolve to the DPW to do not only the cleanup at all these parks, but do a preventative maintenance plan on the top lots as well. They're starting with the nice weather. It's starting to get crowded down there, and I checked with the DPW Parks Department, and they'll only more or less respond to complaints of items that may happen, maybe missing a piece of equipment or something of that nature. I think in the interest of public safety for the children and the families of our community, we should have them in on a Saturday maybe and go through every park in the community and just check them all for safety, as well as start doing the cleanups with the graffiti removal, as well as I know they're getting the baseball fields ready for the upcoming season, but these tot lots are certainly a priority. I know Barry Park has some issues with the tot lot that has to be addressed that was brought to their attention, but a citywide systematic approach, and let's be proactive so that someone doesn't get injured at one of our parks.
So here you can hear the Boston, the Boston accent, especially when it comes to the A sound, the ah, in car or park. That's how I say it. But in Boston, it's not car, it's car and park, and it's often a much louder sound. It's not car and park. So the ah sound is ah. It's much strong. It is very. It's there's other parts of the Boston accent, but that is the most identifiable. And so whenever that ah sound comes out, it's ah. It's almost as an R-A-R sound. That's the Boston accent. This is the general New York accent, New York City accent. This will be old men yelling at each other during a kind of a negotiation meeting between city officials and the workers' unions, and how they talk. There'll be some similarities with the New York accent and the Boston accent, but you can find the differences. Something about New York City is because so many people live there from different parts of the world. There's ethnic accents, and also each part of New York City has different accents. Now, nowadays, it's gone away so much because of that's how nature is. But someone from from southern Manhattan, could speak very differently from someone from northern Manhattan. And that's only if you were walking, you could walk the island of Manhattan in probably 2 hours, maybe 3, depending on how fast you go. It's not a big place. Like Captain America is from Brooklyn, and Spider-Man is from Queens. There are different parts of New York City. Like, imagine them kind of like Goose, but much larger. And those places have different accents of English, which is quite interesting. So let's give a listen to the old New York accent. We won't watch it. Oh my goodness.
핵인 슬래시가 궁금해?
Get out. Okay.
No, what I'm saying. No, wait. It isn't.
Any equipment in the park department, whether it be in forestry, in shops, or out in the field, the trucks belong to the motor vehicle operators. That's their title in the city of New York, to drive all equipment for the city of New York. You have a man getting $13,000 driving a vehicle which is out of title, and a man is sitting down $7,000. That's all he gets for a starting salary. A motor vehicle operator. Why doesn't the city put a motor vehicle operator on that truck for $7,000 rather than have a man that's a qualified tree surgeon, $13,000 riding behind a wheel of a truck, driving a truck? What is he doing that for, Mr. Lord?
Now let's get that straight. Every negotiation.
What do we have motor vehicle operators hired for? What do we have motor vehicle operators hired for? Do we hire forestry men to drive trucks, or do we have motor vehicle operators? Service. We have motor vehicle. That's your interpretation of a crew service. I'll take and show you a truck down there that's 20,000 pounds. That's a motor vehicle operator's a responsibility to drive through a city street.
It is
and you
not.
have to have a professional man behind that wheel.
You're not a professional. Let's get something straight. Listen to me.
Who's not a professional?
You're not a professional.
I'm a professional driver for the city of New York.
Okay, here we have the New York accent, and they're negotiating it, and they're insulting each other. Because it's the unions and the city trying to negotiate salaries and how much their workers should get paid. But you can see here how they're talking, and like the word tree surgeon came up, and how the man, bring it up, this man, one of the union representatives, how he says tree surgeon, putting that more emphasis on the oo, on the sound rather, and how it puts a lot of R sounds into it. Also, the replacement of T sounds, t, into d. This is where a lot of people get the strong impression that Americans don't say water. They say water. And New York people will often say water. It's just how they talk. So this is the general New York accent. We don't need to see all of it. This will be posted, of course, on E-Class if you watch 1960s New York men yell at each other about money. This is a big thing. Scottish accent. And this is actually from a movie and from Trainspotting. So there's all these men, characters, they're all drug users, and they're all young men, so they use bad words. So please be aware that they do use bad words, but that is also how people talk. One of the actors here, you know him. He's Ewan McGregor, who you've seen in lots of movies. But you've always seen his acting accent, and this is something closer to how he actually used to talk. All right, so this is the Scottish accent. Remember, they didn't used to speak English. But, oh my goodness, there we go.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Tommy, this is not natural, man.
It's a great outdoors. It's fresh air.
Look, Tommy, we know you're getting a hard time off Lizzie, but there's really no need to take it out on us.
Doesn't it make you proud to be Scottish?
It's shite being Scottish! We're the lowest of the low! The scum of the fucking earth! The most wretched, miserable, servile, pathetic trash that was ever shot into civilization! Some people hate the English, I don't! They're just wankers! We, on the other hand, are colonised by wankers! Can't even find a decent culture to be colonised by! We're ruled by effete arseholes! It's a shite state of affairs to be in, Tommy, and all the fresh air in the world won't make any fucking difference!
Sorry, man. No, I'm sorry. I appreciate it, Tom.
All right. There's Scottish, and there's some words there. You can hear how they say their A's differently, and also how they different. Instead of saying shit, they say shite. It's just how they pronounce the word, and often write it as shite. So there's a lower class Scottish accent. Okay, this one is Afrikaans. This man, de Klerk, he was the last white president of South Africa. I don't know how much you've learned about South Africa. You've probably heard and learned about Nelson Mandela, but I don't know how much you learned about before Mandela. Anyways, but South Africa was colonized by Dutch people from the Netherlands, and they lived around Cape Town and the southern part, and they became their own people, their own group. So the Dutch became Afrikaan, and they speak their own kind of language. It sounds like Dutch. And then, so there's two kinds of white people in South Africa, traditionally. British white African and Afrikaans. And so, I don't know, some of you might have had South African Wanamingyosa teachers, but I don't know how heavy their accents were. So Afrikaans people, they speak English, but they speak it as a second language. And as you might know, there's lots of different kinds of people in South Africa. They have at least 5 official languages that they speak. So there's lots of code switching in conversation, because most any South African speaks at least 2 languages, and probably 3 or 4, or possibly 5. And 7 is not it's not uncommon. Lots of people speak lots of languages, so they'll switch in between them. So this is an example of South African accented, especially Afrikaans accented English.
대한민국을 움직인
This is not an
테러의
example of that.
청정 폭풍 속으로
At an earlier negotiation situation, there were proposals on the table in the case of the old Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. The British government was very directly involved in negotiations because it was not an independent country like South Africa. And offers were on the table. I think it was on a ship somewhere, I forgot the name of the ship, which would have put Ian Smith and the whites in the old Rhodesia in a much better position than the final deal he made. But he passed it up and he wanted too much. He wasn't prepared to make painful compromises and concessions. There were some people, there are still some whites today telling me, I gave away too much. As there were blacks until Mr. Mandela's death who said he made too many compromises. Those were the hardliners, and I think Ian Smith himself was a hardliner. He wanted too much. There are some whites who say, I could have negotiated a white veto in a new constitutional system. I never stood for a white veto, because that would be a form of continued racial discrimination in favor of a minority. I stood for checks and balances in the Constitution. I stood for elements and institutions which can prevent the misuse of power. but not for a white veto. And I think what Ian Smith held out for and what he lost in the end was a form of a white veto. But I'm not an expert on the old Rhodesia and on Zimbabwe.
Yeah. So you can hear that. It sounds almost like he's kind of like a German speaker speaking English very well, but he's speaking it with his accent, and his accent comes in and affects his English pronunciation, which is normal. But that's an Afrikaans accent. Lots of actors in Hollywood, if you know, remember Charlize Theron, she's from South Africa. And well, some others that you might not know, but Charlize Theron, she's in lots of movies. She was the bald lady in Mad Max Fury Road. She was Furiosa. But she does an American accent, usually when she's acting. So there's the South African accent. This is the broad Australian accent. Australia doesn't really have very many different accents. There's the educated, which sounds more British. There's the general, which is just... And then there's like basically what they call the broad accent, which is like the country accent. This man, Steve Irwin, he spoke with a broad Australian accent. If you ever want to make fun, if you ever want to tease an Australian and like make fun of their accent by imitating it, you would do a broad Australian accent. Hugh Jackman, the guy who plays Wolverine, he's Australian as well, but he speaks with a general Australian accent. He lived in England for a long time as well. So here is an example of a broad Australian accent from a long time ago.
The only reason I'm doing this is because this one's a python, and as you see, he won't bite because he can't eat me, and he doesn't feel scared. I don't scare him, so he won't bite, and he hasn't got venom. Now that's a python, but it's very difficult from a distance to tell a python from a. You might have to cut him, he's biting my neck. I'm serious.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, if I watch the telly, I should be able to. Can you get a close in on this?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God, look at that.
Oh, he's gonna let go, yep. Perfect.
Did that hurt?
No. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So that was an example of the broad Australian accent. And you get to see Steve Irwin. He got bit by a snake. And he doesn't react. He apologizes. I love the puppet in that. The puppet acting scared. But you can hear, it comes out, a lot of the accent differences come out in how we say our vowels. For when you take your EP1 classes, some of you might be in them right now, when we talk about English pronunciation, this is where a lot of the differences between Englishes can come in. Steve Irwin, everyone liked him. Most everyone. So he showing my age here, but he got killed while filming in 2006 or 2007. So right when you were, most of you were busy growing up. All right, we got a few more. This is Canadian, and this man, Don Cherry, he is a sports commentator for hockey, and a lot of times Canadians can sound a lot like Americans in general. He is an example of the stereotypical Canadian accent.
퇴근하고 나면 한 것도 없는데 왜 잘 시간일까요?
This is not Don Cherry.
오늘 보니까 탄산수를.
Get out. All right.
I mean, can I say something about this guy? He's 6'3", 215 pounds, and he comes out and says there shouldn't be fighting in the game. Well, the guy don't
That's
fight.
the first thing Don Cherry can't stand. Namby-pambies who won't fight.
Well, you can provide muscle without taking penalties or fighting.
Oh, yeah, you can provide. Well, look, I'll tell you something.
His opinions reach 3 to 4 million people a week between periods on Hockey Night in Canada. But very few, watch below the belt here, get to jab back.
And I don't.
And then there's the thoughtful Cherry. Take women in the NHL.
Well, actually, women in the National Hockey League, I think it'd be great. I think every dressing room should have one.
Cherry on world affairs.
I am sick and tired of Canada kowtowing to the rest of the world. I heard a politician say, we have to be careful because the rest of the world loves us. No wonder they love us. We're weak. We're spineless wimps.
You don't go through life conducting Pier 4 brawls. Stay with us, Sports Week.
But what really bugs him?
I can't stand criticism. One bit.
Well, you're in the wrong business.
I know, but I can't stand criticism.
You gotta be kidding. You mean, I think half the things you say are a bunch of crap. And you're telling me you can't stand criticism?
I can't stand criticism, but what I do is
Somebody who dishes it out like you?
I take it where it comes from people like you. It doesn't bother me, left-wingers, see.
That's anyone who disagrees with Cherry, and there's the odd one around. But not tonight. He's back in a cubbyhole in Maple Leaf Gardens watching the game on TV and trying out the lines. He works all day on his diatribes, and it needs reassurance from co-anchor Ron McLean.
I say, what is this guy? Are you going to bring up him?
I don't know.
Oh, no, you don't know. You're not. Brian McClellan, 6'3", 215 pounds, doesn't like fighting. Can you imagine that? All I got to say to you, Brian, worry about yourself, get some goals, get some penalties. That sound good? And for Christmas, I hope you got a tennis racket so you can play 15 love. That sounds good, doesn't it?
You have to get hepped up for this when you go on.
Hey, there's 3 million people watching. 3 mil.
Well, I have to get a little wired, but I thought for you it came naturally.
No, it doesn't. Nothing comes naturally. It's all hard work.
And attention to detail.
But it's high. It shoots down on my head.
Cameras are cruel to balds.
So here we can hear the stereotypical Canadian accent. I'm not sure you've heard this. I don't know if any. Surely some of you had Canadian teachers. There's a lot of them statistically, but they probably tried to cover their Canadian accent like that. But you can hear with goodness, Don Cherry. Again how he talks. The comes out a lot harder. The CBC commentator, the interviewer, has a Canadian accent as well, but he is much flatter because he's a news broadcaster. Sports broadcasters are allowed to have much more character in their voice. But yeah, Don Cherry, he's been commenting on hockey, which is Canada's sport, their national sport, for 30 years. He got fired recently because what he's been saying the whole time has been terribly offensive. You heard talking about he doesn't like Canadians being known for being nice because it just means doing whatever the other person wants you to do. So he gets in trouble a lot with the Canadian government, kind of. Now, okay, so far, most of the examples we've looked at have been what they call native-speaking countries. Legally, all people from all those countries can come to Korea and work in schools as part of the EPIC program or in Seoul as a native-speaking English teacher. The South Africans kind of snuck their way in because a lot of them don't speak English as their first language, but they speak it close to native. This next one, this is Malay. This is Mahathir Mohamad. Malaysia speaks English very well, but it's not their first language. But Malay English is easily identifiable. It has certain quirks in it that you can tell someone's from Malaysia by how they speak their English. And you can distinguish Malaysian English from Singaporean English, from Indonesian English. Even though these countries are very close to each other, their English does sound different accents. So let's see. This man is an old man. So it's going to, he's a 93-year-old man, so it's going to sound a bit different. Let's see where it is.
To run again for office at the age of 92?
Well, when I stepped down in 2003, I had no intention of being in politics still. But after I stepped down and the new leader takes over, a lot of people came to see me, asking me to do something because they were not satisfied with the leadership of my successors. Responding to the appeal, I tried to advise, but even with the fifth prime minister, I had to resign from the party and campaign to have him step down and give way to the Dato Sri Najib.
So we can hear there, with Malay English, one of their big characteristics is they sing song going up and down, up and down, up and down. Indian English has something similar as well. So it goes up and down, much more, some people say musically than other kinds of English. That's the biggest thing. Then also how he pronounces some words. Pati, there's much higher intonation than you would find, than how I talk or how Don Cherry, the Canadian man, would talk. Okay. We're making our way. Got a few more examples. We're not going to go too much. This is, I put AAVE. This just stands for African American Vernacular English. You've probably heard different African American or Black Americans talk. And so I wanted to show you a few examples of how this is. This is from, we'll move this
old
forward.
Streets and
There we go.
There's a lot of money in Memphis, and there's a lot of poverty. You know, we have parts of South Memphis where whole streets and blocks are just vacant. It's like a war that people left due to some catastrophe, but it was just white flight and sprawl. And so what used to be a small family-owned grocery store is now a vacant building, and on one end of it they have a liquor store that's typical of South and North Memphis. Nobody is going to be attracted in terms of grocery stores, retail, to an area that is sparsely populated and looks and feels dangerous.
So you can hear how she talks. And she's African American, and she would speak differently than a white person from the same city. So there are different ways of talking there. All right. And this is rural West Virginia. This is one of the poorest places in America. And so we can see how they talk.
퇴근하고 나면 한
There's a
것도
lot of
없는데
ants.
왜 잘 시간일까요?
회원님, 오늘 보니까
Get out. Okay.
This was a county that has paid its dues to the state, and the state has deserted us.
If you don't have food, you don't know where your next meal's going to come from.
The politicians are going to have to start telling really hard truths. And the people of West Virginia are owed that.
In one of the poorest states in the country.
See, I live in that apartment building across the street. I get up every morning, come over here at 8, make me some coffee, read my paper, and kill time.
Ed Shepherd is 92. His gas station stopped pumping in 1995.
Up this main street, there wasn't an empty building that didn't have a prosperous business in it. But little by little, they began to close one after the other. And now it's down to a ghost town, a ghost county, really.
When was the last time someone stopped and asked you for some help with
Oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago, I don't remember exact. Occasionally somebody will pull in the driveway, asking for directions, or they're looking for something else in the county. All the good activity is gone, and we're just sitting here now.
Okay, that man is 92 years old. I think he looks really healthy for 92. But you can hear how he talks and how he says, we're just sitting here now. So again, we instead of we're sitting here now, he says, we're just sitting here now. Because there's no jobs. West Virginia, that town, the area is very famous for mining. But the mines are closed. Korea has something similar in Gangwon province with there was a Jungsun and Taebaek. They were very big mining towns, cities even, and the mines closed. So what else do you got? And so Korea's been trying to help those places maintain economies and maintain jobs, but it's hard. It's hard to replace thousands of jobs at once. So that's what's going on in America as well in some places. But anyways, we can hear their accent there. Okay. That was a lot I just forced you through, and there's a lot more. We talked about New York City having different accents within New York City. There's a general New York accent, but there's a Queens accent, a Brooklyn accent, a Bronx accent, Staten Island, which is part of New York City as well. Then there's ethnic accents about Jewish people, a Jewish ethnic accent. If you've heard Bernie Sanders talk, he's from New York City, from Brooklyn, and that's how he has a Jewish accent. Donald Trump is also from Brooklyn, but he's not Jewish. So they have different accents, but they still have a New York accent, how they talk. So it comes out in lots of different places. Depending on your education, that can also affect your accent as well. Where you're from, ethnic background, all these things affect pronunciation. So there's lots and lots of different dialects and accents of English. And that's why I'm going to make a small assignment for you to do a little more research into try to find different kinds of accents and what your impressions of it are. Because we hinted at it before, but people are very judgmental of different accents of how you talk. To go back, how that old man talked, do you think he's very smart? Based on how he's talking? Most people say probably not. And that's not fair, but it is something that a lot of people do when they need to get jobs or get a better job or deal with customers. They need to change how they talk. If you want to be on television in America, you need to, so to speak, talk normal. You're not allowed to talk in your native accent. If you've ever seen Stephen Colbert, he's from the American South. His native accent is a Southern accent, but to get on television and to be successful on television, he had to speak general American flat English. He had to not talk with his native accent. So it is something that's a bit sad. So there'll be a short assignment for you this week to examine a bit more about accents. But nothing too much, nothing too stressful. We're nearing the end. And so it is working along. In fact, mentioned before, this is week 13, and week 14 we're finished, but there's 15 weeks in the semester. So week 15 will be an assignment that you'll need to take care of on your own, and that will count as week 15. So, but that will all be delineated very easily on E-Class. All right. Anyways, this is a bit more meandering than other lectures, but I hope you've listened well. Have an excellent week, and goodbye.